Hey, what's up, Spencer? My name is everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to be talking about the movie The Substance, which came out on January 20th of this year. And this is about a woman who decides to take a substance that is supposed to make her young and beautiful again, but only for 7 days at a time. And of course, because this is a horror movie, things do not quite go the way that she wants them to, and oh boy, do things get a little cray cray. Honestly, I'm not sure how much of this movie I'm going to be able to show you guys in little clips and stuff like that, because outside of just being a body horror movie, there's also a lot of titties and ass in it. So yeah, YouTube doesn't really like that type of stuff. So I guess we'll see how it goes in editing. I was actually very excited for this movie when I first saw the trailer, not just because body horror is my favorite subgenre of horror, because it's the only type of movie that actually really freaks me out and scares me, but because it seemed to go really well with the book that I happened to be reading for my Transmask book club group back in October. So I do actually run a Transmask book club for the Transmask support group that I am a part of, and for October's read, we decided to read the book Transmuted by Eve Harms. And this is actually a very short book. It's only about 100 pages or so, and it is about a trans woman who raises $40,000 in order to get feminization surgery, but when her father gets cancer, her sister kind of guilt trips her into giving the $40,000 to her father so that he can try out an experimental surgery. And because she no longer has the money to pay for the surgery, and because her dysphoria is getting so bad, she decides to try this free experimental surgery that at first is going very well. She is very happy with the results. They happen very quickly, but her body just keeps changing and keeps changing and keeps changing until she turns into a unrecognizable creature. And a lot of other stuff also happens in the book, even though it's a short 100 pages, but I don't want to spoil it for you in case you are interested in it and you want to read it for yourself. But so when I saw the trailer for The Substance, I was like, oh, okay, this seems very similar to Transmuted, where we are taking this unknown experimental substance in order to achieve a standard of beauty that normally would not be achievable for us at this point in time. And then, of course, it is going to go wrong. So it seems like I should watch this movie to do a little compare and contrast and see how the two, the cis version versus the trans version of this same type of body horror is gonna be. So that's what I did about a week and a half ago. I sat down and I watched this movie, and oh my God, I am so glad that I did. This is one of the best movies that I have seen in a long time. I believe Kenny JD described this movie as unrelenting, and I would absolutely agree with that. This movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and even though it is a pretty long movie, it keeps going and it does not stop. When I sat down to watch this movie, I knew that I was going to want to make a video about it. So I got out my little notebook so I could write down some little thoughts and ideas that I had about it, and then proceeded to not write a single word because I was so captivated by this movie for the entire time that I was watching it. It is incredible, and there are just so many different lenses that you can really watch this movie through. Obviously, there's going to be the standard beauty lens, looking at it through how women are really held to this extremely ridiculously high standard of beauty, especially if you are a woman who works in the entertainment industry. There is the addiction lens, where you are starting this substance and you always feel like, oh, I can stop whenever I want, or just one more time. This is the last time, I swear. Or you really feel as though you are not the real you until you are on this substance and you are taking this stuff. And then obviously there's the trans lens, which is how I went into looking at it, where there's two different versions of yourself. There is the version that society wants you to be, and then there's the kind of more true, authentic version of yourself. There's the feeling the pressure to take this medication to mold your body and yourself into a more palatable version for the rest of everybody else, whether you yourself really want to or not. There's also the mother-daughter lens, the feeling as though the older person is really giving up everything and giving everything to the younger self, and then not feeling as though they are being properly respected and given the amount of credit that they feel that they deserve. There's just so many different ways that you can look at this movie, and probably ways that I haven't thought of or come across yet. And that's just great. I love movies in which you can interact with it in 50 million different ways, and everybody has like a different version of it and a different interpretation of it when they're watching it. But anyway, I feel like I have talked enough for the intro at this point. So with that, let's get into the movie, The Substance. So this movie starts off by introducing us to a woman named Elizabeth Sparkle. And the way that they do that is that they show us the creation of her star on the Walk of Fame, and her being there and celebrating it, and other people coming by and being like, oh my God, it's Elizabeth Sparkle. But then over time, people start to walk by the star, not really notice it. It starts to crack, it starts to fade, until we get to this point where a man who's walking by drops his burger and a comically large amount of ketchup all over this star. And you gotta pay attention to all of this ketchup, because it's actually going to come back to us in the future. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that this guy picked up his burger. I feel like most people, when they drop food on the ground, they don't pick it up. They kind of just leave it there. I mean, not me. I would definitely pick it up, but you know, I mean like other people, most other people. So then we cut to Elizabeth Sparkle doing this like 80s style aerobic show. And at first I thought this was kind of like a flashback, but it's not. It's current. The movie does this thing where it's kind of 80s, but it's also kind of now, where like people are using iPhones, but also they're advertising for jobs in newspapers. It's a little weird, but it's a really interesting aesthetic choice. And at some points, it kind of feels like Elizabeth is kind of the only person who is really holding on to this 80s aesthetic. You know, maybe she's like really clinging on to the past, but it really like goes throughout the movie. And it's a really interesting way to kind of, I believe the director said that they wanted to make it like a timeless film. And so this is really interesting to have it be like 80s, but also today. I really like it. It's a really fun dynamic, you know? But anyways, apparently this is what Elizabeth is famous for, is she is a famous like aerobics instructor on TV, and she has been doing this for many, many, many years now. And honestly, like this really reminded me, it harkens back to like the early diet culture days. We still have diet culture nowadays, but it really reminded me of things like Jenny Craig and the South Beach diet. But now Elizabeth has been doing this for so long that she is turning 50. Oh no, how dare she? I can't believe that they even let her out in public at this age. I mean, honestly, she should probably just be shot in the street for daring to turn 50. But so Elizabeth needs to do a little tinkle, but for some reason the women's room is out of order. And so this means that she just decides to use the men's room, which, as a trans person, there are all sorts of things that I can say about this cis woman just casually walking into the men's room, but we're not going to get into that right now. But while she is in the men's room, she overhears her boss talking on the phone about how Elizabeth is old and she's ugly and she's bleh, and they need to get rid of her and find somebody who's hot and young and fresh. And they need to do it ASAP because, like I said, Elizabeth is committing the horrid crime of existing as a woman at the ripe old age of 50.
We need her young. We need her hot. We need her now. How the old bitch has been able to stick around for this long. That's the fucking mystery to me.
Not to mention that this man is clearly just as old, if not older, than Elizabeth, and he definitely does not look as good as Elizabeth does at this age. Like, he does not have any sort of skincare routine going on. You could definitely tell by how crusty he looking. So then it cuts to the business lunch that Elizabeth is having with this crusty old boss man, where she is getting fired. And during this lunch, we are really getting the sounds of him eating and like snapping up all of this shrimp and like just consuming it in the most disgusting way horrible possible.
People just love that. I mean, that's just the way it is.
And let me just take a moment here to stop and like notice and talk about the sound design, the camera work, the costuming, honestly, just everything in this movie. Because like I said, this movie is a full 2 hours and 20 minutes. And yet, it is very clear that they put a lot of thought and attention into every single shot and every little detail. And it is just so... The sound design like really gets in your ears and you can really like feel it, and there's so much of it that just feels like so accurate, and like every single shot kind of like really elicits this emotional reaction. And there are so many clothes that I was just like, ooh, that is a look. I love it. I just love this movie and want to subject like every person that I know to it just because it was made so incredibly. Anyway, so while driving home, Elizabeth sees her face getting ripped down from this billboard, and this distracts her so much that she gets into a car accident. And I have to be honest, this is the best car accident that I have ever seen, and it's probably because it just goes on for so long. And then we cut to Elizabeth being in the hospital, and miraculously, she is perfectly fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with her. But, you know, this is still the straw that breaks the camel's back. So she is having a whole emotional breakdown while the doctor's standing behind her being like, oh my God, it's your birthday. Happy 50th. Also, my wife loves you. As somebody who used to work at a hospital, I've definitely had coworkers who did not have tact or who did not know like when they needed to keep their mouths shut or like how they would come off to patients, and it would be just so annoying. Like, no self-reflection, no self-awareness. Would you come on, you need that shit when you're working in the medical field. So even though the doctor told Elizabeth that she can go, the nurse is giving her one last examination. He's like, it seems like you might be a good candidate. And Elizabeth is like, what? And he's like, nothing. You are good to go. And he hands her her jacket. And when she takes the jacket, we see on the back of his hand that he has this huge birthmark. Oh my God. I wonder if this character is going to show up sometime later on in the movie, and that the birthmark is going to be the thing that tells us that it's him. No, there's no way something like that would happen. So when Elizabeth goes outside and she puts her jacket on, she finds in her pocket this thumb drive that says The Substance on it, with a little handwritten note that says, this changed my life. But before she's able to like really process what it is, she runs into a guy who she went to high school with, and I think his name is Fred. I don't remember, but I'm gonna call him Fred. Anyway, she runs into Fred, and Fred is like, oh, Elizabeth, holy crap, it's you, 10th grade homeroom. Don't you remember? We should hook up sometime. No, we should meet up sometime, not hook up. we should meet up sometime. We should get some coffee. We should catch up, all of this stuff. And Elizabeth is like, oh, yeah, totally. We should totally. Like, she's not into it at all. And so Fred rips off a corner of the piece of paper that he's holding and he writes his number on it and he goes to give it to her and immediately drops it in this nasty, disgusting, dirty puddle. And then picks it up and still hands this disgusting piece of paper soaked in goose shit water to Elizabeth. Bruh, why would you do that? If you run into a famous celebrity who used to go to school, like, wouldn't you want to increase your chances of them calling you? Like, why wouldn't you rip off another piece of your paper and just do a new one? Oh my God. If I used to go to school with somebody famous let's think of who is somebody who does like exercise or sports or someone who I really admire. Rob Dyrdek. If I used to go to school with Rob Dyrdek and then I ran into him again 20 years later and I wanted to meet up, I wouldn't give him this disgusting shit-soaked piece of paper. I would brandy new one. You got a whole entire 8.5 by 11 piece, just rip off another corner. Fun fact, even though I did not actually go to school with Rob Dyrdek, he's much older than me, I did share my freshman college dorm with Haley Hawes from the show Ghost Hunters. And that was an experience. So Elizabeth goes back home. She plugs this thumb drive into her TV and she watches this, basically an advertisement for the substance, which says that you are the Matrix and you create a new version of yourself and you can exist as that new version for 7 days and then as your old version for 7 days. You are one, you cannot escape from yourself.
The one and only thing not to forget. You are one. You can't escape from yourself.
So first Elizabeth is like, no, this is stupid. And she throws the thumb drive away. But when she is reading the newspaper later, she sees an advertisement looking to hire new talent for her job that she just got fired from. And they are only looking for like 18 to 30-year-olds. So she is not even close to the age demographic that they are looking for. Basically, they're looking for a younger version of her. So she goes back into the trash, digs out the thumb drive, calls the number that is associated with it, and sets up for her to pick up her activation box. She heads out to this really sketchy location, and they give her like a little key card in order to get into this like really weird tiny place where she gets her activation box. And when she goes home, she finds that there is the activation serum, good for one use. There is the stabilizing equipment, and then there is food for the self and then food for the other self. And then she does it. She draws the activation serum and she injects herself with it, which just, anybody who has to do injections, whether it is HRT or insulin or for like any other reason, good for you. Great job. I cannot do that stuff. I have to bribe my pharmacologist roommate to do it for me because I just cannot do something like that to myself. I don't know what it is. I just stabbing myself, doing medical things to myself. I'll do all sorts of medical things to other people, but to me, oh God, no. So with this substance, you would think that it would just kind of like turn back time. It would make her skin smoother and like her wrinkles go away and like make her hair shiny and stuff. But no, it does not. This is a body horror movie, remember? And so it creates a literal second self. So everything in her body is splitting apart. We see her eyeballs split. There are 2 eyeballs in one socket. Her whole entire body is like breaking up. And then her spine splits open and she passes out. I will be honest, I was yelling during all of this part. Body horror is like one of the only things that really gets me. So like when the body is horroring, it, ah, so when she wakes up, there is this body laying in front of her with its whole entire back split open. And she kind of stumbles up and goes to the mirror where she sees for the first time her newer, younger self. And this is Sue.
I'm Sue. I'm Sue. Sue, 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 Sue.
So Sue takes this thread that came in the activation box and she sews up Elizabeth's whole spine, because that's what the second bot, it's Elizabeth's like kind of carcass, I guess, her shell, but also at the same time it's still alive. She's still breathing. She's moaning a bit. Ooh, she sews up Elizabeth's entire back. And then she takes the stabilization equipment and screws this giant needle onto it and stabs it into her spine and takes out what I can only assume is spinal fluid. And this is an important part of this whole entire substance thing, is that every single day, Sue needs to inject herself with this stabilization spinal fluid in order to stay normal. If she doesn't, she kind of gets really bad withdrawal symptoms, I guess is the only way that I can really describe it, where her ears are really ringing, her nose starts bleeding, like she gets really dizzy. She like needs to be taking this every 24 hours. And then again, after 7 days, you have to switch back. And honestly, props to Sue for like knowing what she's supposed to be doing with sewing up the spine and stabbing stuff into this, because this box came with literally no instructions. It just says stuff like every day you stabilize, you feed the other self, after 7 days you switch back. Like that's the only instructions that she really gets. And like, my autistic ass would definitely need a 37-page Word document with instructions, and then I would probably still fuck it up somehow. So Sue goes to the casting call, and before she officially goes into the room, we get to see the casting director people, who are presumably two cishet guys, who are talking absolute shit about the girl who goes before Sue. They're like, oh my god, she is so ugly. She's just the worst. Did you see her nose? Like, she would have looked so much better if she had a boob on her face instead of her nose. I swear to God, cishet men come up with the most insane things to say. Holy shit. Like, where do you come up with this shit? But anyway, the second that Sue steps into the casting room, they're like, oh my god, you are gorgeous. You are everything that we want. We don't wish that there were boobs on your face, and so we're going to hire you immediately. Everyone, including the crusty old man that fired Elizabeth, is just so into Sue. And it's at this point that Sue was like, hey, I totally want to do this, but also at the same time, I can only work 1 week on, and then I have to have 1 week off because I have a sick mother. Yeah, a sick mother that I have to go and take care of every week or every other week. And at first you're like, oh my god, there's no way that this is gonna work. They're immediately gonna dump her because Hollywood like always demands so much from you. Like there's no way that they're gonna be cool with this. But instead, the crusty ass old boss man is like, oh, Sue, I love that. That is perfect. You are the public is gonna love you even more than they already were because you were just clearly an angel with a heart of gold going to take care of your sick mother. Yes, I am so into it. Of course you can have every other week off if you want. Okay. He also doesn't remember his assistant's name, even though she's been working for him for 2 years or so, because I guess she's not hot enough for him to remember her name. So Sue starts hosting this brand new aerobics show. And the difference between Sue's show and Elizabeth's show is massive. Like, clearly when you are watching Elizabeth's show, the demographic is very obviously middle-aged housewives who are looking to like tone and shape their body. Whereas with Sue's show, the demographic is very obviously men who are only working out one of their arms, if you know what I mean. So things go great for Sue. The 7 days go by, and then she has to switch her consciousness back into her old body. But things are, not going as well for Elizabeth. You know, she has this huge break in her spine, very painful, just down there, that needs to heal. She hasn't eaten any real food in a solid week. She goes back to her old job, and they have taken down all of the pictures of her and her work that she has been doing for the last like 30 years or so. And her boss like runs up to her with all of her stuff in a box. And like the way that he talks to her and the way that he like mentioned that he has no idea what his assistant's name is really made me feel like he didn't know what Elizabeth's name was, even though they've presumably been working together for the past 30 years. And he like kind of shoves this box into her arms and then like ushers her out the door and is like, oh yeah, it was so great working with you. Have fun. Bye. And because things aren't really going so well for Elizabeth, you know, she doesn't really have any purpose to her life anymore. She doesn't have anything to do. She kind of spends her 7 days falling into a depression and just sitting in front of the couch and watching TV. And all she's doing is, you know, counting down the days until she can be Sue again. So back as Sue, Sue determines that she can't just like leave this body laying on the floor of her bathroom like all the time. Like no matter what, she's gonna have an extra body kind of like laying around. So she decides that she is going to build a secret little room in her bathroom in order to hide Elizabeth, but also this like giant picture of Elizabeth that used to be hanging in the living room. Both of them get shoved into this corner in the back of the apartment to be shut away and forgotten for the next week. And at the end of the week, Sue decides to go out clubbing with all of her coworkers. And when she comes back from clubbing, she got a boy toy with her. And they kind of like getting down and dirty. They're gonna do the do. They're gonna bump uglies. I hate that phrase, but a lot of the times if I hate a phrase, that means I'm going to use it. I love to make myself cringe. But as they are starting to get it on, Sue is having like, she is not doing well, because it is time for her to switch back into her Elizabeth body. But she really doesn't want to do that yet because she hasn't gotten dick down, and she really want to do that. So she goes to Elizabeth and she steals just a little bit more spinal fluid to hold her over for a few hours so that she can get fucked. And when she goes back out to have sex with the boy, she like unzips her zipper. And when she does that, all of her internal organs fall out. Now, come to learn, this didn't actually happen. This is kind of like a weird nightmare that she has had while transferring her consciousness back into Elizabeth. So Elizabeth wakes up and she's like, oh my God, I just had this dream that all of my Sue organs were falling out. So she gets up and she goes out into the living room and she finds this note that the guy that Sue had fucked had left that says like, hey, I was too drunk to try and ride my motorcycle home last night, so I took a cab and then I'll be back later to pick up my motorcycle. And as Elizabeth goes to pick up the note, she notices that one of her fingers is all old and busted now. So Elizabeth calls the substance hotline, like the same number that she had called to get her activation box. And she's like, hey, she took extra time for me and now my finger is all wonky. So I was just calling to see like what I can do to fix that. And the guy is like, there is no fixing it. There also is no she. There is only you. As long as you respect the balance, there will be no other issues. And then he hangs up on her. So when Elizabeth goes to pick up her refill kit, she's feeling very paranoid. She thinks that somebody is following her. So she grabs her kit and she runs to a nearby coffee shop to try and calm down. She orders a coffee and an old man talks to her and is like, hey, 7 days is a long time to wait, isn't it? And we look down and this is when we see a giant birthmark on the back of his hand. Oh my God, it's the nurse from the Who could have guessed that this was going to happen? Definitely not me. So he also asks Elizabeth if Sue has started stealing time from her, which freaks Elizabeth out so much that she kind of just pays and leaves without drinking her coffee. And when she gets back to her apartment, she runs into the boy that Sue had sex with the night before. He is back to pick up his motorcycle, except he does not recognize her, obviously. And he is super mean to her because, again, how dare she, a 50-year-old woman, exist outdoors in public where other people can see her? Ooh, she needs to get back inside and never show her ugly ass ever again. The nerve of some people subjecting us to that. Ugh. Lila, are you farting because you stinky? Or is that Kenzie? Are you farting because you stanky? So because Elizabeth is feeling so insecure and she herself has no value at all, she really wants to get some outside validation that she does have worth. So she goes through all of her purses and she finds the number that Fred gave her, which I cannot believe that she actually kept. I would have thought that she would have thrown that away immediately. Why would you keep this wet, gross piece of paper? Either way, she calls him. And he is very surprised to hear from her. He's like, oh my God, I never thought that I was going to hear from you again. This is great. I would love to meet up with you. Let's set up a date tonight. Let's go out. Let's get some drinks at 8 o'clock tonight. I know exactly the place. I will treat you. It will be amazing. Except as the time grows nearer and nearer for her to leave, Elizabeth finds that she cannot do so. She is trying to leave and then she goes back to fix her outfit. She tries to leave again and then she goes back to fix her makeup. She clearly has no confidence in herself. She does not feel very beautiful or attractive, and she doesn't feel like she's going to be good enough for this random guy from high school. And ironically, this is the part in the movie in which I was like, wow, Demi Moore is so pretty. And I think it was probably because Elizabeth is really looking at, there's this giant billboard that has been placed right outside of her apartment that has Sue on it. So Elizabeth is really looking at this giant billboard of Sue and comparing herself to it. And I was really just aware of the differences in beauty because, obviously Sue is very beautiful of her own, but she also looks extremely young. I don't want to say that she looks like a child, but she's definitely looking more like a high schooler. Whereas Demi Moore, she has the beauty of a woman. She looks like a woman. She looks like an adult. And that, in many ways, is very attractive. And she is just gorgeous in and of herself for being a 50-year-old woman can be extremely attractive. I know that there are a lot of younger people out there who are terrified that when they grow older that they are not going to be attractive at all, which is why there is such a huge anti-aging trend going on TikTok right now. But that is absolutely not true. Older people are definitely attractive in and of themselves. When you grow older, your attraction also grows with it. Unless you're Leonardo DiCaprio. As you grow older, your attraction grows with it. So 50-year-old people are reasonably going to be attracted to 50-year-old people. And also just growing and maturing on your own, you kind of learn to see the beauty in so many different things. It kind of really made me think of this Supernatural episode in which Sam is getting hit on by a 70-year-old lady. And it's like way back when this episode like first aired, when I was like 14 years old, like of course I was like, oh my God, ew, gross. A 70-year-old lady wanting to have sex with Sam? That's so yucky. But now that I'm 30 and I'm watching this, I'm watching this episode again and I'm like, Sam, damn, this lady, she fine. She got it going on. You should definitely hit that. Blow her back out. Make it so she needs to have a double hip replacement. I mean, she's probably got like 50 years of experience, so you know she knows how to suck a dick like a Hoover. Anyway, my point is that older people are just as attractive as younger people. They're just kind of attractive in different ways for different reasons. Like crow's feet can be very attractive, like just looking like a woman instead of a girl can be very attractive, you know. Yeah, older people are hot. Anyway, so Elizabeth gets so self-conscious and overwhelmed with comparing herself to Sue that she does not go to this date at all. She completely ignores Fred's texts as they are rolling in. He's very concerned about where she is. And so instead of going on this date, she kind of just sits in front of the TV and binge eats. Back as Sue, she is doing her show. She popping her ass when suddenly she feels this giant bubble like burst out on her butt. And she like freaks out, but then when she checks again, it's not there. But then the camera crew was like, whoa, wait a minute. We saw something weird on the cameras. Let's pull it up and let's play it back. And Sue is like, oh my God, I don't want everybody to see this giant like hideous lump that just like appeared on my ass for some reason. So she runs away into the bathroom. And as she is kind of like feeling her body, she finds this mass and moves it around to her front until it's at her stomach, and she reaches through her belly button and pulls out a whole entire chicken leg, like with the meat and the skin and everything on it. Ooh. Come to find out, this is again one of those like weird transition nightmares where Sue wakes up and she's like, oh my God. Whew. And when she goes out into the living room, she finds that Elizabeth has left all of this like discarded food everywhere, including an entire chicken carcass. So Sue calls the hotline and she is like, this balance is not working. I am working my ass off while she just sits around all day watching TV and binge eating. I cannot do this. And the guy on the phone is like, again, there is no she. There is only you. Sue shows up to the studio to find that everything has kind of been shut down. And she's like, oh my God, did the show get canceled? What is happening? Oh no. And she has to go up to crusty old boss man's office to try and find out what's going on. And it turns out that instead of the show being canceled, it's like the exact opposite, where they are being promoted to a primetime slot because Sue is so popular and everybody loves her so much. Now she's having all of these opportunities. She's on the cover of Vogue. She's getting interviewed. She's having all of this stuff come up. And because of that, she doesn't really have time to be Elizabeth again. So she's stealing more of the spinal fluid. And when we finally have her switch back into being Elizabeth, half of her body is gone. One of her legs is like all shriveled up and looks like an old lady leg. Her hair is all gray and kind of fallen out. She almost looks like she has a stroke because one half of her face is all like wrinkled and slightly droopy. And she is just, ooh, it is not. So Elizabeth calls the hotline again. And the guy is like, okay, if this is clearly like such an issue, you can stop. We can't undo the damage that has been done, but you can stop so that more damage will not keep occurring. And Elizabeth says, no. Instead, she just goes back to doing what she has always been doing, which is just sitting in front of the TV and kind of just doing that, sitting and watching TV, which at this point, I mean, what else is she going to do? She's basically pretty severely disabled. Like, she practically has to break her own leg just to even get up out of her seat. And what she is getting up out of her seat for is this present that she sees sitting on her little bookshelf, because when she was getting that box of her things like shoved at her by her crusty old boss, he also was like, oh hey, I got you a going away present. This is something that like my wife really likes, and because you'll have so much time, like this is what you can do now, so here you go. And she is only now opening it weeks later, and it turns out to be an A to Z French cookbook. And for some reason, Elizabeth decides that she is going to make every single recipe in this book. Now, I don't know how she has all of the ingredients to make 26 plus recipes, but she decides to do it. She really giving off witchy vibes with the gray scraggly hair, and she like stirring a bunch of stuff, you know, so this is what she's doing. When a pre-recorded interview of Sue comes on the TV, and Sue is kind of talking shit about Elizabeth. She isn't like fully bad-mouthing her, but she's like, oh, well, you know, Elizabeth is kind of a has-been, you know, I'm the now, like people are forgetting about her. And Elizabeth gets very insulted by this, especially when they ask Sue, like, what her beauty regimen is. Like, oh my God, how do you stay, like, so young and so beautiful? And she, like, doesn't give Elizabeth any credit for anything. So this causes Elizabeth to have kind of like a pseudo schizophrenic like meltdown, like not really, but it's very reminiscent of kind of how schizophrenia is like portrayed in the media, where she starts throwing food around everywhere and making this giant mess, and she takes old newspapers and she papers her entire window that like covers her whole entire living room so that she cannot see that giant billboard of Sue anymore. And when she becomes Sue again, Sue is not having any of it. She's like, fuck this. I am absolutely done. I am never being Elizabeth ever again. So she goes into the secret room and she starts mass harvesting substance from Elizabeth. Even though, because she has previously been harvesting from Elizabeth, the wound on her back has been getting like really infected and has like a bunch of pus coming out, and it is pretty nasty. 3 months goes by, and it is the night before the network's New Year's show, which Sue is supposed to be hosting. Except, oh no, Sue has now run out of stabilizing fluid. And when she tries to get more from Elizabeth, Elizabeth is tapped out. There's nothing left in her. So Sue calls the hotline again, and the guy says, the only way to get more stabilizing fluid is for you to switch back and to let the body naturally regenerate it on its own. That's literally the only way. And obviously Sue does not want to do this, but she has no choice. So for the first time in 3 months, she switches back to being Elizabeth. And this is when we get to see Elizabeth for the first time after 3 months. And honestly, she looks better than what I expected. Like, I expected comic book Deadpool level body where like pieces would be rotting off and like teeth falling out and like all sorts of stuff, but it isn't that bad. It's pretty bad, but it's not that bad. Instead, Elizabeth is like really hunched over. Her whole entire body's really shriveled. Her boobs are like hanging way down, and she's just looking a hot mess. She doesn't have any hair. She just, ooh, ooh. And as soon as Elizabeth sees herself, she's like, I am done. We are not doing this anymore. Absolutely not. So she calls the hotline. She tells them that she wants this to be over. And then she literally like sprints down the street to go and pick up the chemical that's supposed to end all of it. And I don't know how she's running so fast, because if you haven't used that body in 3 months, like surely the muscles have atrophied, but somehow she booking it. So she takes Sue, brings her out into the living room, and starts administering this chemical to Sue that is supposed to like kill her so that there's no way for her to ever switch back. But halfway through, Elizabeth regrets it. And she is like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And she literally says, like, you are the only part of me that is lovable.
The only lovable part of me. You have to come back.
And so she tries to save Sue. She's doing CPR. She's doing all of this stuff, and nothing is working until she decides to try and switch again. And this somehow like breaks the consciousness so that both of them are awake and inhabiting both bodies at the same time. And as soon as Sue sees the ending life substance and realizes what Elizabeth was trying to do, she starts chasing Elizabeth around, beating the crap out of her. At one point, they're in the bathroom, and Sue is like holding Elizabeth by the head so that they're both looking at each other and themselves like in the mirror before she starts smashing her into the mirror. And then obviously this culminates in Elizabeth's death. As soon as Elizabeth passes away, there are immediate repercussions. Like Sue can feel that Elizabeth is now gone. And she is definitely fucked. Because, like, where is she going to get any more stabilizing fluid from? Where is she? You need to have both halves. It is both you. And you cannot live and survive without having half of you. However, there is no time to think about this because Sue has a show to do. So she goes down to the studio and she gets all dolled up. She gets in her dress. She's looking gorgeous, except she is not feeling very well. So she goes into the bathroom where she then proceeds to pull several teeth out of her head. And it's not like the back teeth where you can try and hide it. It's the ones right in front. Like she is fucked. And I actually had a teeth falling out dream for the very first time like a week ago. I know that other people have like had this dream like pretty frequently. For other people it is very common. I had never ever had this type of dream before, and oh my god, just the sensation of my mouth being full of loose teeth was insane. Ooh, ugh. But the thing that was like really infuriating about this dream was that I kept on trying to tell my mom to like call the dentist so that they could fix my teeth. And she kept on saying, what? I can't understand what you're saying. Like, bitch, what do you think that I'm saying? Oh my God. I don't know if this movie is what triggered me to have that dream for the first time ever, because I didn't have that dream until like several days to like a week after seeing this movie. But maybe it's a large possibility that this movie caused me to have that body horror dream for the first time ever. So because Sue's body is falling apart, Sue thinks, I need a new, beautiful body. And I happen to still have the activation serum back at home. The one that said, like, good for one use only. Like, I still have the vial of it. I didn't use up all of it. So I should go home and make myself a new body. So she starts making her way home, She runs into crusty old boss man who tells her to smile. She's in the elevator when her ear falls off, and like the guy who's in the elevator with her, like, is not noticing that she's in distress at all because he's just noticing like how pretty she is in her dress. And when she finally stumbles home, she injects herself with the serum and then passes out. I originally thought that we were going to get like a child version because, you know, newer, younger, but no. Instead, what we get is an incredibly deformed, monstrous body. And this is Monstra Elisu. So Monstra Elisu has like all of these extra limbs. She's very big, like she has a huge head, all of these extra eyes. She has Elizabeth's face on her back with her mouth just open in this perpetual scream. It's very horrifying. And again, I thought that at this point in the movie, Monstra Elisu would just like go up to the roof of the apartment building and end it all, because clearly she is never going to attain the standard of beauty that she has been trying to get to. But instead, Monstra Elisu puts on her dress, she shoves her earrings into her skull, even though she doesn't have any holes. She tries to curl what little hair she has and actually ends up like burning some of it off. And then she takes the picture of Elizabeth, like the giant picture that had been hanging in the living room. She cuts out the face of it. She glues it onto her own face, then puts some lipstick on and leaves to go back to the studio. When she gets there, this stagehand, not phased at all. He's just like, oh my God, there you are. We are going to be starting in any minute, so you need to hurry up, get on stage, let's go. But as Monstra Elisu is like walking on stage, the other performers who, all of these performers like somehow have their titties out, even though this is supposed to be like being broadcast on national television. As Monstra Elisu is walking on stage, all of these performers are like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, that is not Sue. And Monstra Elisu tries to do her speech, but it is coming out very slurred. It's very difficult to understand what she's saying. And then the picture that she glued on her face falls off. And remember the part back at the casting when those guys were like, oh my God, that girl would look so much better if she had a boob on her face. Literally, this orifice on Monstra Elisu's face just spits out a boob and it falls onto the stage. And then everybody starts screaming. It's a very like Frankenstein's monster type thing where people are like, ah, the monster, the monster. We even get like that whole old-timey joke of like a man screaming like a little girl. And people are literally saying, kill the monster, kill the monster. While Monstra Elisu is trying to say, no, it's me, it's Elizabeth. Very interesting that she's saying, it's me, Elizabeth, instead of it's me, Sue. But she's trying to get people to calm down. Obviously, they're all freaking out. And a guy comes up on stage and smashes Monstra Elisu's head. And it just comes right off, but it doesn't really like do anything. Like something immediately starts growing in its place. And then the arm that is holding the mic snaps off. And Monstra Elisu starts spraying the entire crowd with a comical amount of blood, while like hardcore death metal is playing in the background. I had read somewhere that the director used something like 36,000 gallons worth of fake blood for this scene. And oh yeah, you could definitely tell because she is spinning around like a ballerina, just fire hydrant, spraying people in blood. Everybody is completely soaked. It is Carrie times a million. And eventually, Monstra Elisu, like, kind of escapes off stage, goes down the hall. She's still spraying blood. She's covering all of Sue's pictures with blood. And then she goes out onto the street and she's running and she falls. And as soon as she hits the ground, she kind of just explodes into a mass of gore and body parts. And from these body parts crawls Elizabeth's face. And it makes its way down the sidewalk until she gets to her Star of Fame, where she stops and she's looking up at the stars and she is envisioning all of these people clapping and cheering for her. Again, she can only feel good when she is having like that outward validation. You know, she can only feel as though she is a real and valuable person when other people are saying that they think that she is valuable. And with this, she kind of just melts away into a puddle of goo, which is very reminiscent of all of the ketchup that was dropped onto her star at the very beginning of the movie. And then in the morning, a custodian comes by and just cleans her up with his automatic scrubbies. And that is The Substance. Ooh, oh boy, this movie. It was a long one, but also a good one. I don't know how long this video is. Right now, my recording is setting up at 1:10, so I'm sure that this is probably going to be a pretty long video by the time that I edit it. But thank you so much if you have made it like all the way to the ending of this video. If you want to see more videos about this movie, I know that Amanda the Jedi and Kenny JD both made videos about this movie. I watched them and they were both very good. I really liked them. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, because wow, there's a whole lot that happened in this movie and a lot that we can talk about. Whew. But right now, I think that I have probably talked enough. So if you like this video and you want more like it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But besides that, make sure that you stay safe and have a fantastic day. Bye.